Today we'll be getting into some of the things that could go wrong on your trip and what to do so you can still have a magical experience. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, July 6th, and you're listening to episode 95, What to Do When Things Go Wrong at Disney. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now. Disney shared some details on this year's Food and Wine Festival this week. So Disney had previously announced that the festival would run August 28th through November 22nd and would bring back favorites like Emile's Fromage Montage, Remy's Hide and Squeak Scavenger Hunt, and over 35 global marketplaces, which is what Disney calls the food booths during this festival specifically. So this week they announced the return of Milled and Mulled. I think it's Muled.
Yeah.
With the fall fruit cheesecake featuring boursin fig and balsamic cheese with pomegranates and candied pecans, which was a huge hit last year. So that's coming back. The pão de queijo, which is Brazilian cheese bread. That's going to be at the Brazil booth. And the fan favorite griddled cheese with pistachios and honey from the Greece booth.
Delicious.
Agreed. They also announced the full lineup for the Eat to the Beat concert series, which will have returning favorites like The Fray, Smash Mouth, and Boys to Men, as well as new performances from Beach Boys, Bowling for Soup, and Jordan Sparks, among others. The concert series dining packages are also returning, where you're going to dine at a participating restaurant at Epcot, and then you get reserved seating for one of the evening's show times. Reservations for these are set to open on July 16th, and that's coming up right away, so make sure to stay on top of that, if it's something that you're interested in for your trip.
And as you are likely already aware, Test Track is set to reopen on July 22nd. So there will be cast members, annual pass holder, DVC, and Club 33 member previews leading up to the official opening. That's what they usually do for all those reopenings.
Yep.
And Disney has announced that the refreshed Test Track will operate a standby queue and be added as a Tier 1 attraction to MultiPass for Epcot. This will bump Soarin' down to a Tier 2 on that date. So that'll make Remy's, Frozen, and Test Track the Tier 1s for this park, and then Guardians will continue to be the only single pass for Epcot. This isn't surprising to us. The refresh isn't really significant for it to feel like a brand new attraction and the hype that comes with all of that.
Yeah, agreed 100%.
So you almost certainly heard about the child that fell overboard on the Disney Dream a week ago on June 29th. It was all over social media.
And
it's
crazy. Actual news outlets.
Yes.
Yep.
So the Dream was on its way back to Fort Lauderdale when the child fell overboard and her father immediately jumped in after her. Disney emergency crews responded very quickly and they were able to rescue both the guests within minutes. This is not a common occurrence, so Don't worry if you're going to be going on a cruise in the near future like we are.
Yep.
Luckily, this incident had a very good conclusion and both guests returned on board safe and sound. And the incident is understandably under investigation as we speak because they have no choice.
No, exactly.
So we have finally had a pretty relaxing week all in all. Oliver's sister and her husband were in town visiting and all activities are now officially on hold for the summer. We've had just a really nice week visiting in the evenings and they have actually taken our kids to do a bunch of fun activities during the day while we've been at work and they're having such a great time. So yeah, we were really happy to have them here. We were already missing our brother-in-law, so it was a great visit and we still have another week with your sister, so it'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. So with that said, let's get into today's main topic. So you've spent months, if not years, planning the perfect trip. You've saved up diligently. You've watched videos, read blog posts, listened to podcasts. You've done all the things, right? You've booked your dining reservations. You've made your lightning lane selections. You've studied park maps and prepared park itineraries. And long story short, you've done basically everything that is within your control to give yourself the best chance at having like an easy breezy vacation. But womp womp, something goes wrong or doesn't go as planned, right? So that's going to be the topic of today's episode. So Walt Disney World is the most magical place on earth. There's no doubt about that. It's certainly my favorite place in the world. And they're in the business of making memories that'll last a lifetime. Okay. And I know that sounds like sappy, but it's true. And they do a really good job at immersing you and like tuning out the outside world. All that promised magic does come with some pretty sky-high expectations, though, but sometimes, almost inevitably, each and every trip, something can and does go wrong.
Absolutely. And this doesn't mean that your day or your trip is completely ruined. If you know what to do in these situations when things don't go as planned, it can certainly make whatever is happening just a little bit less stressful, and then you can hopefully navigate what is going on and still have a great time. We'll give you an example. This may or may not resonate with some of you that have visited Walt Disney World when Genie Plus was still a thing, and you had absolutely everything to do at 7 a.m. in the morning. This was in April of 2023, I think, and we were with the kids, and we were on the bus from the Polynesian to Rope Drop Hollywood Studios first thing in the morning. It was early and 7 a.m. hit as we were on the bus, so Oliver and I were both on our phones with the My Disney Experience app open, ready to book Slinky Dog Dash and to purchase an individual lightning lane for Rise. But lo and behold, the app was not working. We were getting an error message that the app was experiencing issues and we just could not book anything.
Yeah, 100%. And we knew it wasn't just us too, because other guests on the bus were reacting.
Oh, you could feel it.
And like they were talking about it, right? So nobody was able to
Yeah.
book. And like actually when we got to the parks, again, like everybody in line at the touch points, that was the topic of discussion. Everyone's like, oh, can you get on? Can you get on? And nobody could. And it lasted quite a while. So, we entered the park, we rope dropped Slinky Dog, and then we went to Toy Story Mania, I believe. And then when we were in line for Smuggler's Run, it finally came back up. And then, we started booking and the day went off without a hitch from there. But at 7 a.m., like back when Genie Plus was a thing, that was stressful.
Yeah. And the only comfort we took was that it wasn't just us, right? But then you were on edge waiting for it to come back on. It was definitely stressful.
Yeah, exactly. And, we knew that, it probably would come back during the day and we'd still have a great day, but we had been planning that trip for months, right? We knew we wanted our day to go a certain way and we were ready to book right at 7 a.m. and we were like dividing and conquering to up our chances. But again, the app just wasn't working. Best laid plans, right? So we had done everything we could do up to that point, but something out of our control threw a wrench in our morning plans. Now, the only thing we could really do in that situation was to wait for the app to be operational again, right? But we didn't throw our hands up and call it quits on the day, right? We still rope dropped, took advantage of early entry, and we still had a phenomenal day, by the end of the day. So with that said, let's talk about some of the things that could go wrong in your trip and how you can mitigate the impact that it has on you and your family.
Yeah, so first up, let's talk rainy weather. This is pretty much the most obvious one. Many guests who have traveled to Disney or are currently planning a trip have more than likely looked at historical and estimated monthly rainfall totals and average temperatures for the times that overlap their trip. And then in the weeks and days leading up to their trip, they are definitely looking at that 14-day forecast. And then, of course, the 7-day forecast and then the day-to-day forecast. It's just unavoidable to do that.
Yeah.
And while there is some validity to that, so that you have kind of a general idea of what you could potentially expect when you're down there, we're definitely going to caution you that it's not worth the effort. The weather in Central Florida changes quickly and often. We have had rain forecasted for every day of our trip where it honestly barely rained at all. We've had sunshine forecasted where it rained a lot over several days. So long story short, don't hang your hopes on the forecast. It is likely to change several times over the days leading up to and then while you are on your trip. The best advice we have always given to first-time Disney guests is prepare for daily rain. And if it doesn't come, then hey, that's just a really great bonus. The reality is that Florida is a very hot and humid climate for much of the year. And so daily rainfalls range from fairly frequent to a daily occurrence, depending on the time of year you're there. That's why their grass is so green.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But with that, there are ways to still have a great day, even when the weather is not great. So this may seem obvious, but the biggest thing here is attitude and mindset. So rain, especially persistent rain, like, morning to evening kind of thing, can really chip away at your demeanor throughout the day. So checking in with yourself, just reminding yourself that you're in Walt Disney World and the experiences that you're going to have are still magical, even if it's raining, can really, really go a long way. Outside of that, having a way to shield yourself from getting soaked is a must. So this can be an umbrella, rain jacket, or a poncho, right? Or a combination of these things. We're partial to umbrellas. The ones we have fold pretty small and they have wrist straps, right? That we can carry them around until they dry a little bit before putting away in our park bags. So yeah, we do like umbrellas.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And then having shoes or sandals that dry quickly are also a necessity in our opinion, right? So on an especially rainy day, the ground at Walt Disney World will be perpetually wet, right? So that means like puddles everywhere. So make peace with the fact that your feet are likely to get wet. But if your shoes dry fast and it does start up raining, right, you won't necessarily have soggy feet like from sunrise to sundown, which is pretty nice.
Absolutely. And then aside from that, outdoor attractions will also close when the rain gets really heavy. But the indoor shows and attractions will still be running. So that's a good time to dip into there and prioritize those ones. And it's also a good idea to keep an eye on an accurate rain app. We like AccuWeather. It tends to be pretty accurate during the day. This can give you an idea as to when there will be a break in the rain, and then you can kind of prioritize those outdoor attractions if they open or any other outdoor activity like during that time. We had an especially rainy day at Epcot just recently on our May trip. There wasn't honestly very many breaks of rain, but when there was, we honestly would just jump on it and we did a couple of food booths because these can be a pretty miserable experience when it's raining because you're eating outside, you're standing there waiting for your food, and you don't really even enjoy your food, if I'm being honest with you, when it's raining. And then another thing to be aware of is that the rain will also cause entertainment to be delayed, modified, or downright canceled. The Festival of Fantasy Parade at Magic Kingdom does not happen in the rain. They do have a really cute, albeit short, rainy day cavalcade that comes in when the parade doesn't happen. So that's definitely a bit of a consolation thing if you really had your heart setting on seeing the parade. This also applies to any stage shows in front of Cinderella's castle. If there is a party like Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party or Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, it can be actually pretty deflating to have that entertainment canceled, as this is honestly a pretty big part of the event. But again, that's not within your control. So finding other ways to make your peace with that, if that does in fact happen, will definitely have a big impact on your perception of your trip as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing to note for the parties specifically, like Lucy's saying, is that even when the weather is like bad throughout the entire night, guest services will sometimes give you a rain check date for the party, but this is typically the exception, not the norm. They've also offered things like a one-day park hopper ticket as consolation, but to a disappointed party guest, that might not mean much. But again, there's just no way around that. You know, sometimes the parties do get rained out and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality, especially at that time of year.
Yes.
And on that same note, heat. Okay. So it's no secret that Florida can be pretty hot, sometimes uncomfortably so. And generally speaking, from April to October, it's pretty hot in Walt Disney World, with the worst heat and humidity ranging in like that July to September range. During these times, it's not uncommon for temperatures to reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit or pushing 40 degrees Celsius at the peak of the day. And let me tell you, walking around the World Showcase at this time is pretty miserable.
Yeah,
right?
There's no shade.
Yeah, this is where wearing like breathable, quick dry materials is going to be your best options. Like, you know, think heavy cotton clothing and similar materials that are like heavier and hold moisture and don't dry very fast won't be very comfortable in this type of heat, right? So definitely something to consider there. And it's super important to stay hydrated, take frequent AC breaks, and then apply sunscreen. I'm putting on my dad hat here, right? But especially for folks who are coming from cooler climates, this can be really like uncomfortable level heat that can be dangerous without proper precautions. And this may require you to alter your plans depending on what you were hoping to accomplish. So for example, if you intended on making your way to the World Showcase, you know, during Food and Wine, for example, enjoying food and drinks at the food booths, and it's like 105 degrees out, you may need to take a shaded AC break like a lot and often, right? So plus, if you've never eaten in this type of weather, you know, it's not nearly as enjoyable, right? So that may be something you'd have to contend with. I remember like a few trips ago, we were there for Food and Wine, and it was like end of August, early September, and it was just so hot. And we were at the Fry Basket, I think.
Yes.
And we were having the fry flight, and it was just like the fries were good, but we were just like, you know, not enjoying it because it was just so stinking hot.
You're dripping sweat and you're like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
And then the last thing we're going to say about weather is contending with severe storms and then potential hurricanes. Officially, hurricane season in Florida spans from June 1st to November 30th. The highest activity will be kind of right in the middle of that in August and September, with the lowest activity early or late in the season. The humidity will generally be probably at its worst during this time. So even if there are no severe storms or hurricanes, this will likely be the most humid and wet times of year, meaning pretty much daily rain, typically in the afternoon and then lasting for a few minutes to several hours. If a hurricane were to form in the days leading up to or during your trip, it could seriously impact your vacation or prevent you from taking your trip at all. So typically speaking, if the National Hurricane Center issues a warning within 7 days of your check-in date, Disney will work with you to reschedule or potentially cancel your vacation without a penalty. Now, it's important to note, though, that this only applies if your booking was made directly with Disney, either by you or a Disney travel agent on your behalf. But it has to be directly with Disney.
Exactly. If you booked through a third party, you would have to abide by their specific policies in the event of a major weather event like a hurricane, right? So just something to keep in mind. And also note that this doesn't include any portion of your trip that, you know, wasn't booked via Disney. So think airline tickets, car rentals, and similar things. These will have their own policies depending on the airline you chose or, you know, your ticket category. So be aware of that and consider, you know, potentially travel insurance, especially if you're coming from out of the country. It's definitely a good thing to consider for sure. Now, if you're already at Disney when a hurricane hits, it won't necessarily impact your trip in any major way. So, for example, we were in Disney late last September when Hurricane Helene made landfall. Central Florida got some wind and rain, but it was not significant enough to actually shut down the parks. We were in Animal Kingdom on that day, and the morning was gray, but everything was running as usual. We got some pretty heavy rain and wind in kind of the back half of the day, but we were at Disney Springs and everything remained open. The only thing that was canceled during that specific hurricane was Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. That was September 26th. Yeah.
Yeah, and thankfully it wasn't our day to go, so we got really lucky there.
Yeah, exactly.
But hurricanes definitely do shut down the parks, and this happened last year as well. Less than a month after Helene, Milton hit, which did shut down the parks. If this happens during your trip, Disney will take care of their guests and employees until the storm passes. You may be required to shelter in place at your Disney resort, and if that happens, Disney will make sure that guests are fed, that they have been provided ready-to-go meals, and restaurants at your resorts will remain open as well. So just be mindful that it'll be a way, way busier than usual time, as all the other guests will also be looking to eat there, whereas they normally spread that out all across the property because there's tons of restaurants to choose from. They will even have impromptu entertainment, like characters coming out for impromptu visits. Cast members will lead games and activities to lift guest spirits as well, which is very, very nice. Long story short, if a major weather event hits during your trip, it may have little impact, meaning it'll kind of just feel like another rainy day in Florida, or it could be forced closures, in which case it will definitely impact your trip. If that happens, just understand that this is completely out of your control, and it's honestly out of Disney's control too. They just have no choice. And when the parks do reopen, try to make the best of the time you do have left. You will be sharing this experience with thousands of other guests, so just know you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. All right, switching gears away from weather now, let's talk about lightning lanes. So as you're likely aware, lightning lanes are Disney's skip-to-line service, right? Whether it's a single pass, which is the most popular attractions in the 4 parks, or multi-pass, which is most of the other attractions. Sometimes things don't go as planned, right? So the most obvious of the things that could go wrong is that the attraction goes down during your return time window, right? So say you had booked a lightning lane for Tiana's Bayou Adventure at 11 a.m. So your return time window would be between 11 a.m. and noon. If the attraction goes down during your return time window before you've redeemed it, you'll get an experience redemption. So this is essentially a wild card lightning lane, right? That you're going to be able to use at select attractions in the park, including the closed attractions when it reopens. Typically speaking, it'll apply to attractions of similar caliber. So if you had an experience redemption for Tiana's, for example, you'd also be able to redeem it at other tier 1 attractions like Peter Pan, Big Thunder, when it's open, right? And like Jungle Cruise, Space Mountain, that kind of thing. If your lightning lane was for a less popular attraction like Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, well, you wouldn't be able to redeem that at Tiana's, right? It would be for a similar tiered attraction like Haunted Mansion. Or, you can always wait for the attraction to reopen and then use it for its original purpose, which is, always an option as well.
Absolutely. And then this also applies to the lightning lane single pass. For these ones, you will get an experience redemption that you'll be able to scan into the ride when it reopens. But note that if the ride is closed for a long time, if you go right when it reopens, the lightning lane can get bogged down. So it actually may be worth it to wait a little bit after it reopens for that initial rush to just die down. And having said that, they will prioritize the lightning lane. So you'll face a shorter wait time than you would in the standby queue by a lot.
Yeah, agreed.
If you are late for a lightning lane, it's important to note that there is a grace period where even if you are outside of your return time, meaning if your return window was between 11 a.m. and noon, you can still scan into your lightning lane after it has expired. Reports on just how long this is varies, but generally speaking, if you are 15 to 20 minutes late, if you just go right up and scan your Magic Band, you're going to be good to go. If it extends beyond that, just give it a try. And if it glows blue, meaning it didn't work, check in with the cast members and just explain your situation. Cast members are extremely reasonable, and if you are kind and courteous towards them, they're going to do absolutely everything they can to accommodate you. Having said that, they do reserve the right to turn you away if you're outside of your lightning lane window, so it is important to manage your expectations. But by and large, if you are running a little bit late because dinner ran long or it took a lot longer to park hop than you anticipated or just something like that, just check in, and honestly, 99 times out of 100, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And on a similar note, dining reservations. So once upon a time, you used to be able to make your dining reservations 180 days before your check-in day, which is 6 months. So that was pretty far in advance to try and figure out, where you were going to be on which day. Nowadays, it's a little more reasonable at 60 days before your check-in day. But even with that, what we found trip over trip is that, we'll always make our dining reservations at 60 days. But inevitably, once we're on property, we'll either modify, sometimes or cancel a reservation in place of another. or like, we're park hopping or evening plans have changed, just like long story short, there's some movement there, right? And sometimes between 60 days and actually checking in for your reservation, a lot of things can happen. Okay. So you can modify your reservation's time to a different time pending availability or to a different restaurant, or cancel the reservation altogether up to 2 hours before the reservation time. There is a caveat to this. Some dining reservations, like Cinderella's Royal Table, for example, at Magic Kingdom, has a 24-hour cancellation policy. Plus, you pay your meal in advance here. So if you cancel within that time or you're a no-show, you forfeit the entire cost of the meal, which is, for a family of four, it's like over $400.
That's a lot of money.
But that is the exception, not the rule. Most restaurants do abide by that 2-hour cancellation policy.
Yeah, and Disney restaurants also have a 30-minute grace period if you are running late for your reservation. After that, you will be considered a no-show and you're going to be charged $10 per person penalty, which if you are a family of 4 or more, that can definitely add up quickly.
Yep.
One thing you can do as well is try to contact Disney either via phone or the cast member chat on the My Disney Experience app. We actually ran into this on our last trip. We were running late to a dining reservation at Sun and Hell Inn restaurant at Epcot coming from Hollywood Studios. We knew we were going to be at least 15 minutes late or so, if not more, I think, hey?
Yep.
So then Oliver actually got on the app and he opened up a chat with a cast member and he explained our situation. They were able to put a note on our reservation that we were running behind, but that we were actually on our way. And then you can also call to achieve pretty similar results. Note that when you call, though, you'll be directed to the general Disney line and not the restaurant directly, which definitely feels like it could be the easiest solution, but Disney restaurants just don't operate that way. We've been a bit late to dining reservations before, but this was definitely by far the latest we had been. And it honestly didn't seem to be a problem. Like, they didn't seem to mind because we took the effort to just let them know.
Exactly.
We are coming, I swear. We're just running behind.
Yeah.
It bears mentioning again, honestly, cast members are super reasonable, especially if you are patient and kind towards them.
No, exactly right. And like what I always say to like other people is that treat them the way you'd want other guests to treat your loved ones if they were cast members, right? So like picture your son or your daughter, they're teenagers and they're working there. Like, how would you expect other guests to talk to them? That's how you should be talking to cast members, right? Because they're just, they're
humans.
Exactly. And they're there to make sure that, people have magical vacations.
And they always put in, like, this is what we love about Disney.
Yeah.
No shade to like Universal Studios, but they just don't have what Disney has when it comes to like the cast members and the vibes and the magic that they create. So
agreed.
Just treat them kindly and they will be good to you.
And that's been our experience consistently, like over many trips.
I've never had a bad dealing with a cast member.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, let's get into transportation issues. So for the most part, Disney transportation is super reliable and it's going to get you where you want to go with little to no issues. It may not always be the quickest way there, but it is very convenient. And most importantly, it is free. So now free, it's a loose term here because your vacation is certainly not free, but you don't have to pay anything above and beyond what you're already paying. Having said that, it's not perfect and sometimes things can and do go wrong. So the Skyliner will close during inclement weather. If that happens and you're staying at a Skyliner resort, so this would be Riviera, Caribbean Beach, Pop Century, or Art of Animation, Disney is actually going to dispatch buses to get you to the parks. Sometimes the Skyliner will also close unexpectedly for a short or a long time. So for example, last September, we were at Riviera for breakfast at Topolino's and we were going to head to Epcot after, but the Skyliner was down, like not down for maintenance. It was just down for
stopped working.
Yeah, it was a temporary closure essentially. So we ended up waiting for the bus for over half an hour and it was taking forever to get there.
So long.
The Skyliner actually did end up starting up just as the bus was coming. So we opted to take the Skyliner, but that was just a short delay, right? But all told, we probably lost close to an hour, which depending on what you have planned, could be problematic.
Yeah, exactly. And the Skyliner also goes down for routine maintenance in January almost every year. It's not for long, usually around a week or so towards the end of the month. So that's not necessarily something that goes wrong, more just something you should be aware of if you are staying at a Skyliner resort during this time of year. It's actually scheduled to be closed January 25th to 31st in 2026.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
The monorail will also stop working when the weather gets really bad, and then the boats are also not very likely to run in that case as well. So Disney will also dispatch buses during these times for Magic Kingdom and Epcot for the monorail resorts. And just like the Skyliner, sometimes unexpected things do happen, and the monorail will close temporarily for a short time or for several hours. And in that case, you'd have to pivot. And then you would be going a little bit to a lot behind your plans. So how do you mitigate transportation woes? Well, a good rule of thumb is to just give yourself at least 90 minutes of travel time if you are trying to make it to a park from the resorts or to Disney Springs for like a dining reservation. Like it's just, you have to give yourself that time, right?
Yep.
Just in case. We have honestly been stung by this a few times when we thought we had plenty of time and we barely made it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that 90-minute rule is just a really good starting point. And then outside of that, if you are really pressed for time, you can take a ride share, either a minivan, which will have better drop-off locations, or just a regular old ride share like Uber or Lyft. A big caveat for rideshares, specifically for Magic Kingdom, is that they drop you off at the TTC, not the front gates. Minivans can and do drop you off at the front gates, though, so this could definitely be worth it depending on what you have going on.
Yeah, exactly. Minivans get primo drop-off
Yes.
like pretty much everywhere.
Yes.
Yep. Next up, nothing puts the damper on a vacation quite like getting sick. Okay,
yes.
so you can push through like blistered feet, mild sunburns, feeling tired, but if you develop something like a stomach bug, that can really ruin one, if not multiple days of your vacation, depending on the severity of your illness. If you're confined to your room because of something like this, it can be extremely frustrating for the same reasons that we've already talked about, right? You spend so much time, effort, and money into planning a vacation, so having, something like that happen can be pretty demoralizing. But the last thing you want to do is make a bad situation worse by trying to push through an illness, right? So your body needs, rest and recovery, and pushing your body through walking like thousands of steps in sweltering heat when you're ill is a recipe for disaster, and not to mention potentially spreading that illness to like other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then outside of that, if you develop something minor during your park day and don't have over-the-counter meds or Band-Aids, each park has a first aid center that has a single serve over-the-counter meds in case you forgot or you just didn't bring any in the park with you. They will also be able to help you if you develop something like heat exhaustion and you just need to sit down in a cool, air-conditioned space to rehydrate. We actually stopped at the Epcot one on a recent trip. Oliver really wasn't feeling the best and we had forgotten to bring Tylenol. So we stopped in. They gave him a few tablets of ibuprofen just to carry him through until we made it back to the resort for the evening.
That's right. Yep.
And honestly, it was nice. They had like a jug of water. You could just keep chugging water. So we sat there for a little bit and you pretty much felt really good after that. Like it just, it was the perfect stop to help you.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. It was a headache or something.
Just had a headache. Yeah. Like it was heat and who knows.
Yeah.
So you can search for first aid in the My Disney Experience app, and this is going to guide you to the first aid station wherever you are on property. At Magic Kingdom, it's right next to Crystal Palace on the left side of the hub if you are facing the castle.
Yeah, that's right. And at Epcot, it's actually in the Odyssey Pavilion on the side closest to the Mexico Pavilion. In Animal Kingdom, it's right next to Creature Comforts, which is the Starbucks location in that park. And then at Hollywood Studios, it's just to the left of Crosswords of the World when you're like first entering the park. If it's something more serious, there is Advent Health Centra Care Urgent Cares Center. Sorry, that was a mouthful.
That was.
But they have board certified physicians for both adults and pediatric care. Transportation to this center is free for Walt Disney World Resort hotel guests, but you will need to provide your insurance information to avoid fees here. So something to keep in mind there. And at the risk of stating the obvious, for emergencies, it's 911, right? Hopefully that will never happen to you, right? The odds of something serious are pretty slim, but you're always at risk of getting a little bit sick. But, to have something catastrophic happen is highly unlikely. But like all things, it's better to be prepared, right? Just in case, especially if you're traveling internationally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. Most of the time, you probably will catch a little cold there. I think we have every time.
We come back with something.
But usually it doesn't put a damper on our trip.
No,
Thank
exactly.
gosh. Yeah. Knock on wood. So next up, let's talk lost items. We've all experienced this at some point in our lives. You've reached for your sunglasses on your head or your wallet or your phone, your keys, something like that, and it's just not where you left them last. Mild panic sets in. You feel all over your pockets and look around your immediate area, and then, woof, thank God you found it. You had just set them down somewhere else, and then you find them almost immediately. But sometimes you don't find whatever the thing is, and you may inadvertently have left it behind. This happens, and it happens to the best of us at Walt Disney World as well. The obvious thing here is if you lost something, return to the last place you saw it, and it may still be sitting there. If you just left your table at the restaurant, for example, go check, and it may still be at the table or with cast members at the restaurant. This honestly happened to us several trips ago. I had actually left my mini ears on Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. We were heading back towards the front of the park by Canada when I had this sinking realization that I had left them behind. So we double backed, and sure enough, a wonderful cast member had found them, and I was reunited.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, just fun fact, I actually lost those ears for good. They're my favorite ears, but I lost those ears for good on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad on another trip, but that was my own fault. I don't even know where they ended up, and That was
They're on the
heartbroken,
track
but
somewhere,
that
and
was on me.
we did not find them that
They're
time.
probably in the garbage now because they're redoing Big Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. And then, if you still can't find your item, especially if it's something that you really, really need, like your wallet or your cell phone, for example, Disney uses a third-party website to actually help with lost items. So it doesn't matter where you lost your item on property. It could be one of the parks, the water parks, Disney Springs, any Disney Resort hotel, or transportation, including buses, monorails, boats, and the Skyliner. The process is the same. So on the Disney website, search Lost and Found, and it'll give you the link for the Chargerback website. Okay, so here you're going to answer a series of questions about your item and where you may have lost it. The more specific you can be here, the better the chances are that you're going to be, reunited with whatever it is. If it is found, Disney's going to send you an email. And if you've left Disney property, you've gone back home, right? They can also mail you your item depending on what it is. Obviously, there's certain things that they can't mail out, but if they can, they will. We've never used this service, but we have heard anecdotally that people have had success, finding their lost stuff. So it's definitely worth a try.
Absolutely. Okay, our next point is any parent's worst nightmare. And you might think that this will never happen to you, and so it's all good, but it actually happens way more than you think at Disney. So here it goes. Getting separated from your child. First things first, and harder said than done, but don't panic. We will preface this by saying that your child is unlikely to be very far from where you last saw them. So have a look around in the immediate area to be sure they're not nearby and just wandered off a short distance away. Failing that, find your nearest cast member and tell them exactly what happened. Cast members are specifically trained for this exact scenario, and they will do everything they possibly can to reunite you as soon as humanly possible. They will immediately notify a supervisor and Disney security. They'll ask for a detailed description of your child and what they are wearing. They will then put out an alert park-wide to all the cast members with a description of your child so that all eyes will be trying to find your little.
Yeah, exactly. And cast members, they're more than likely going to have you stay in that area because that's, where your child is likely to go back to, and because they'll be looking for you as well. So rest assured that if your child approaches or is approached by a cast member, they are also trained to deal with this side of it as well. So they're going to ask for their name, any information your child can provide about you, right? And they're also going to ask for your phone number if your child is old enough to know it. So they then look for you in the immediate area. And if you're not found, they're going to take them to the Lost Child Center where they're actually going to stay until they find you, right? A similar process happens here as well, right? Where communication is fanned out park-wide. So when you speak to a cast member, they're going to be able to relay that information to you so that you can be reunited with your child, right? It works both ways.
Absolutely. So again, not fun to think or talk about, but it's better to be aware of that so that if God forbid this does happen to you, you can be reunited as soon as possible. And then on that note, let's quickly talk about some strategies to mitigate something like this happening to you. First up, clothing for your kids. Consider bright clothing or something like a neon colored hat, something that really stands out so that they are easy to spot. You're probably doing this already for the memories, but taking a photo of your kid first thing in the morning is helpful in situations like this because then you can show the cast member exactly what your kid looks like that day and what they are wearing, which makes it so much easier and faster for them to find your child. And if they are old enough, having them remember your cell phone number and any other details about you, like your age and a general description of what you look like, this is also going to be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, we're a little bit embarrassed to say this, but we lost Sophia. It wasn't really, but we were in the Emporium in Magic Kingdom.
She felt lost.
Yeah. And we essentially, we were at the Emporium. We were just doing some shopping. It was the four of us, right? And we were all just kind of like,
browsing.
Browsing in the aisles, just looking at, the hats, the ears, whatever. And at some point, Sophia just wandered off away from us. Like I thought she was with Lucy. Lucy thought she was with me. And long story short, she found a cast member and then, we were alerted.
I think she was crying. So they sat her down actually on a stool with the other cast member there. And I just happened to be starting to panic, as one shouldn't, but it's hard not to. And so I was heading back because the Emporium is a long store because it's like basically 4 buildings, it feels like.
Yeah.
So as I'm starting to head down to the opposite end where I'm thinking she is, I look on the corner and there she is crying. So I run over, I grab her, and the cast member's like, oh, thank goodness. And then she would actually had to put out a sign saying like, child and parent, I don't know what they said. And all is well. And like it didn't go any further than that. I just thanked the cast member for just staying with her. I was so appreciative. And I didn't talk to any other like people. So it was just that cast member. She was able to control the situation and then shut it down quickly as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
so that everybody, because I'm assuming she just wants, okay, all cast members stop looking.
And it's funny because I didn't even realize what had happened. We were
No, you had no idea.
No, exactly. I was with Caleb, our boy, and we were on our way to our 20s Town Square reservation. And then you told me about it when we caught you guys. So yeah. Anyways, long story short, it happens, right?
It does.
Sometimes it's like something like that, super quick, right? And it's like,
but it's still the
a couple
worst
minutes, but
couple minutes of your life.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And then another thing that can and does go wrong on almost every single trip for every single travel party is some kind of like overstimulation, meltdown, park burnout, however you want to word it, right? But you know what we're talking about. Tempers can flare even in the most magical place on earth, and they do. Okay, we've been witness to many family squabbles, whether that's couples losing patience with each other, kids having a tantrum, people walking off annoyed, like just to name a few, right? And we're not better than anybody else, right?
No.
We've experienced some variation of these things as well. The days are long, the parks are busy, it can be sweltering. And at the height of the afternoon when everyone is feeling like, tired, it can be the absolute best time to work in like a rest.
Yeah.
Okay. This can be anything. You don't even have to leave the parks. It can be a lunch reservation at a table service restaurant, right? Where you can get off your feet for a while, get into some AC and just have a cold drink. Okay. Eat a good meal. Sometimes that's all anybody needs, just to reset and be ready to go for another few hours. Or if you're staying on property, right, you could zip back to your resorts, take a nap, go for a swim, and just relax for a little while, like watching a show, reading a book, or scrolling your phone, whatever you do to unwind. A midday break can really be a lifesaver for many families. We've come to embrace the mid-afternoon break, right? Over the years. And we really, honestly, we would recommend that to any travel party.
Absolutely. And honestly, the last thing we're going to leave you with here is just some general friendly advice. We talk about this on the podcast pretty frequently, but just being flexible with your plans and just the day in general will go a long way. The weather could be bad. The ride you really wanted to ride could be down for refurbishment. Your loved one could get really sick with a stomach bug. All of these things could happen, but they don't have to ruin your trip. There's ways to still work around these types of things and still have a wonderful trip. If and when you start to feel overwhelmed, just take a reset, however this looks for you, and just try to keep the big reason you're there in the first place at the front of your mind, which is likely that you're just trying to make lasting memories for you and your family. Even days that don't go as planned can still be magical.
Agreed 100%. Little things have gone wrong here and there over many trips. And while they can certainly feel annoying and seem like a big deal in the moment, we've had great trips all in all over the years. And at the risk of sounding sappy, we don't dwell on those memories, right? Those are not the things we remember. Those things, like the bad ones, so to speak. And I don't even know if we'd call it that, but they pale.
Hiccups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They pale in comparison to the good times we've had every single trip. And those are the memories that stick with us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
With that said, thank you for joining us today to talk Disney. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And as always, if you could leave us a rating and review, it would be greatly appreciated. If you choose to do so, you can leave reviews right on Apple Podcasts. And for Spotify, you can leave a rating.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at letsgo.to-disney, as well as on our Facebook page, Let's Go to Disney. We share some helpful reels here as well as some fun ones. The link tree in the show notes will take you to all of our socials.
Have a great day and we'll see you real soon.